Oh, we'll talk about that later.
We're live.
Okay, hello everyone. We are very excited to be with you today. My name is Nicole, and this is John, and this is our pal Ritesh Kotak. We are here today for the School of Journalism and Mass Communications Mass Communication Week, which has been going on all week and will continue on tomorrow, where we bring wonderful people in to come talk to us, and we are bringing you live on LinkedIn right now. So please go to LinkedIn and share and tell people that we are live right now on LinkedIn. I'm very excited to be here. We are here today, myself and my colleague John, to represent our class, which is MC 5323, Public Politics Communication and Immersive Storytelling. This is our graduate level class, and we are so excited to be here today to talk about it. John, would you like to tell us about yourself and introduce yourself a little?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I'm very excited to be here. My name is John Zmickley. I've taught at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication for 12 years now, full time, and I'm in the Digital Media Innovation Program. I'm the program coordinator. We teach students about, our mantra has always been training students for jobs that don't exist yet. So instead of training students for jobs that are going extinct, we're hoping that students get the digital skills necessary to innovate and always be pivoting and be learning about new digital technologies in the media. So I teach a virtual reality class for undergrad. I teach JavaScript and advanced coding classes. I teach a web design class, and then also a great fundamentals of digital and online media class of about anywhere from 200 to 500 students a semester, teaching them basics on digital foundations. So HTML coding, WordPress, writing for the web, and some app prototyping in that class. Also definitely delving into AI, teaching some AI classes here, and then also lead a innovation club where students get to kind of have an after school club and tinker with things. So I'm really happy to be here and excited for this. Is the first time I've taught a grad class. I'm so happy to be teaching it with Nicole, and very nice to meet you, Ritesh.
Well, John, it has been an absolute pleasure to teach this class with you. The impetus behind this class came from kind of an unexpected moment where the dean came in to talk to our faculty, and he said, guess what? We're going to be hosting the first presidential debate at Texas State University. And I said, how cool is that? Can we please put a 360 camera in the room and be the first presidential debate that's ever been recorded with a 360 camera? And the dean and director said, well, that's a nice idea, but take some grad students along with you. And of course, as the political climate does, it has unfolded in a slightly different way, but the course is continuing in the same kind of vein. And so I am obviously an assistant professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. I work in the same program as John in the Digital Media Innovation Program. And we are doing all sorts of really interesting things with social media, VR. I also have been teaching with AI, so I'm excited for that. In terms of, sorry, I lost my screen. It just went bye-bye. In terms of this class, we obviously are still continuing on with this idea of like, how can politics engage with immersive technologies, whether it's AI, AR, MR, VR. And so in this class, we're doing a lot of interesting things. The students have made a 360 video about the technological transitions of election coverage with respect to political debates. They are making worlds in Unity, and they are going to be having actual debates and protests that we're going to be holding in online spaces like VR chat. So I think it's just going to be really, really a fun time that we have together. And I just wanted to say I've known Ritesh now since I taught a VR class entirely inside VR in 2022. And it was very serendipitous, but at the same time, my friend Ritesh was developing the very first moot in the metaverse for the University of Ottawa, another school in Canada on the East Coast. And I was so fortunate that I got to attend this twice, and it was so incredible. And since then, we've just kept in touch because we have so much in common and we love the same kind of forward innovative technologies. So I want to first say thank you, Ritesh, for coming here today. We're so, so grateful to have you. And then just going to open the floor for you to first tell us about yourself, and then I'll revisit this idea of that moot in the metaverse.
Perfect. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic. And I think we've had a few conversations in VR where we were avatars, but just so everyone knows, we did meet in real life. So we do know each other exists in the real world. And I think that was our physical and virtual worlds colliding all at once, which was super neat. So pleasure to meet everyone. My name is Ritesh. I'm based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I actually stumbled upon this. I've always been a techie. I've always been someone that's trying to push the envelope, looking at new technologies and how they impact everyday, just our everyday work. I grew up in a family business. My parents are small business owners. They're in food manufacturing, and we didn't have an IT department, a legal department, accounting department. You are the IT department, legal and accounting, and you always have to learn about new things and continue to evolve. And that's when I really became interested in technology. I remember my dad coming home with the first Pentium 486 running Windows 3.1. For anyone who might know what that is, all MS-DOS stuff. And I remember I was 3 or 4 years old. I remember taking it apart and I couldn't put it back together. And instead of screaming and yelling at me, he instead encouraged me. And he goes, "That's okay. Today you can put back 0%. Tomorrow maybe 10%. And before you know it, I was building computers and building my own tech, and always thought I was going to take over the family business and become maybe an engineer or an accountant, make my parents proud. But as I did a degree in business, I ended up joining the police department actually right after finishing my undergrad. The Toronto Police were recruiting. I applied and didn't think that they were going to take me, and they did take me. And because of my background in technology, I very quickly went into the tech side. So not IT, but technological investigations. That time, social media, open source intelligence, digital forensics were really taking hold. Everyone was starting to get a smart device. There was tons of data. There were crimes that are being committed, and how do we keep the public safe and prevent victimization? That was kind of my role. I did that for about 6-7 years, developed the first cyber crimes unit. Then decided to move, did my MBA in Europe, but did an exchange in Asia, got recruited by a big tech company, spent 2 years all over the world working in tech. And I decided at that point I wanted to do more. And I decided to go to law school and become a lawyer. So I am a licensed lawyer now in Ontario, and my area of practice involve privacy, data, cybersecurity. I deal a lot with breaches, but also AI and emerging technologies. I get a lot of phone calls from organizations saying, we want to use this particular type of tech. What should we be cognizant of? What should we be thinking of? And it's really opened up a whole world of possibilities. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to turn it back over to our gracious host, and we'll take it from there.
We're so excited to have you, and it's just going to be such a great conversation. I'm just going to temporarily remove you, John, just so they're a little bit bigger. But I just wanted to give an opportunity to all of our wonderful grad students who are in this class to quickly say hello and what your interests are. And if you want to, you can say like a quick sentence about your experience so far inside VR. Dylan, would you like to go first?
Hey guys, my name is Dylan. So a little background about me is I have my undergrad in journalism, and so for the past couple of years now, I've been exploring that place and have a couple of bylines, and so it's really interesting, sort of comparing, because I remember back a couple of years ago I did a politics beat, and so now in this class we're taking VR and immersive technologies and sort of bringing that to the political space and political engagement. And I think so far it's been really interesting to kind of see that merge together. So yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if you have the same screen as me, but then Desiree, David, Daniel. Okay, just keep following the screen along.
Okay. Hi, I'm Desiree. My background, I did my undergrad in digital media innovations, part of Professor Zemickley's department. And I honestly just really love technology, and I see it going really big places in the future. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Nunez. I just graduated from Texas State with a degree in advertising. So this is my first semester in my graduate degree, and I'm really just trying to narrow down what my interests are and figure out what I want to do for my career.
Hey everyone, Daniel. I'm a public relations guy, and hopefully after this experience, I'll be able to bridge the gap, between athletics and technology. That's my focus.
Very cool. Next row.
I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Itlali Escatel. I graduated from Texas State with a bachelor's in public relations, and I do hope to work in that field once I graduate. And I decided to take this class because I feel like I'm not very tech savvy. So I was hoping to learn some new stuff, and I am. So I'm excited that I decided to join this class.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexander Teria. I'm a digital media enthusiast, so I've been very interested in digital media. I created my first website about 4, 5, 6 years ago. And so this class, I'm very interested because we are looking at 360 and VR technologies and how they are able to change or impact political engagement. And that is very interesting to me. Also, my research interest lies in digital media effects. So I'm really interested in how VR technologies can actually impact the news and information environment.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Levinson. I'm obviously a non-traditional student. Have a little more seasoning on me than some of these other guys. And that's because I got my undergrad from Michigan State, graduating in 1984. And since then, I spent a 30-year career on the business side of the television industry, working for brands such as NBC, Universal, and Fox, and EW Scripps. And retired last year and been working on my master's. I'll graduate in the spring and then hope to then parlay that into an opportunity to teach somewhere, hopefully at Texas State. But I would certainly like to teach on the collegiate level after I graduate.
Thank you for the great introductions. It's nice for everyone to get to know each other. Ritesh, tell us about the concepting of the first moot in the metaverse and what that was like, and like all the things that you had to do in order to make that a reality.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. So firstly, a moot is a mock trial at the end of the day. I don't know if anyone here watches Suits or watched the Suits. Very interesting story. That's not how the practice of law works, and I'm not Harvey Specter, but that's a side story. Look, here's the thing: is that when you do these, and they did it in Suits all the time, right? They would do mock trials to see kind of how an outcome could potentially be, and practicing your arguments, and that is one of the highlights of law school. Everyone says when you get a chance to do a moot, that's a highlight. They usually bring in real judges. They'll bring in your professors, practicing lawyers, and you go through a challenge. It's a very fair challenge, so there's no one side has a stronger case. It's kind of equal, and you go ahead and you formulate your arguments and you practice, and then you get feedback that leads into some sort of competition. There's usually cash prizes, but people do it to really understand how to improve and how the judicial process works. Because the first time you're arguing your case in court is very, very intimidating. So all the practice you can get is absolutely essential. So that's where moots come in. So back in 2019, I approached the dean of the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law, Dean Adam Dodek, and I said, Dean, I think there's an opportunity to leverage technology in a unique and interesting way. This is, again, pre-COVID, so the tech was very clunky at the time. And I said, Dean, at some point, this is definitely going to be the future. It might not be judges and people wearing these big headsets and being transformed into VR, but I think there's an opportunity to really leverage this type of technology. And he goes, sure, Ritesh, see what you can do. Feel free to explore it. And as I started exploring it, the numbers I was getting to create scenes and mock courtrooms was like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, I don't know how it is at Texas State, but if I go to the dean and say, I need $100,000 to build a mock courtroom, they'll laugh at me, right? Like they'll literally laugh at me. So I was like, okay, this idea is in the back of my head, but at some point I'm going to do it. And then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, everything went online, but a lot of what I found were professors in the beginning just didn't know what to do. They were taking their PowerPoints and just adding audio to it. There were Zoom calls that were dropping. I saw tons of video of professors with the camera up their nose because, again, it was just technology that they just weren't used to. And moots also were kind of canceled, which was a highlight of law school. And I was like, well, this is an absolute shame. Could there not be an opportunity now to leverage VR? And at that point, I did go to the dean again, and I was able to find some corporate sponsors. Also, the technology was rapidly getting better and getting more affordable and more economical at the same time. So what would have cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars now is costing me like less than 10,000. Just these headsets went down in price in some cases to like $400, and that's Canadian. So I don't know what that would be in US. Again, I can make a joke about that, but it was pretty cheap, these headsets and the licensing and some of the dev work around it. So at that point, what I did was I was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to pull this off, but how am I going to do it? And I realized right off the bat, I need a big name to help me out here. Like I need someone who's going to lend some credibility to this, because we weren't getting much play. And I just got lucky. We had a retired Supreme Court Justice of Canada agree to be one of the judges. So and it's not just any Supreme Court judge. For those of you that follow the judicial history, I don't know if you do, but this is Justice Ian Binney, who's like a rock star in Canadian judicial circles, and he agreed to be one of the judges. We also found a current sitting judge, Justice Jody Lynn Waddalove, who agreed, and then we had a corporate partner that was willing to put up some money to help us facilitate this, and we were able to kind of make this happen. So we did the first moot. It was really interesting, and there's some the whole thing's on YouTube, by the way, and we put tons of press around it. But it was really interesting to see these justices literally putting on these headsets and trying to figure out how to navigate and what to do, and like literally we turned these judges into avatars, and it was super neat. And at that point, I got asked a question. We even had the Attorney General of Canada, I believe, I think it was the Attorney General of Canada at the time, give a keynote at our event. And the question I was asked is, okay, Ritesh, like this is great. You're turning the judiciary and all these courtrooms into a big cartoon. I was like, no, that's not the point here. The point here is that, do I think that trials are actually going to be held completely in VR? No. But do I think that elements of VR, and now we're getting into mixed reality, spatial computing, all that stuff, do I think that is going to be incorporated into our legal system? Absolutely. Imagine having a picture or a surveillance video, but now all of a sudden being able to have some sort of spatial rendition of a particular scene or an object, where jury members could be transported in, or judges and defense counsel can actually literally paint a picture of what happened. And we are seeing elements of this kind of creeping in already. We see this in law enforcement or in policing, where drones and 360 cameras are recreating crime scenes. Well, those recreations these are 3D recreations that are being played in 2D formats. And that's where I think this type of technology really comes in. And that was my whole goal with this moot is bring up the technology today, similar to what John is trying to do, right? Talking about futuristic technology that we'll need tomorrow, is equip law students of today with the technology that could be introduced tomorrow and give them the edge, give them that little boost. And that was the idea behind it. We're now going into our 4th year, and every year it's gotten better, I would say. So the first year was kind of that effect of, the first moot in the metaverse. In the second year, what we did was we went back into this cartoon mock moot courtroom. But what we did was, I don't know if there's any people that collect sneakers, but we're able to get a pair of some Air Jordans. And we created a 360 rendition, or an exact rendition of that Air Jordan. And we introduced that artifact into the courtroom. And the whole idea was around a sneaker that was sold that could have been potentially counterfeit or not a collectible sneaker. And it was a deal gone bad. It was a contract law case, and somebody wanted their money back. And the people were arguing, well, wait a second, you asked for a sneaker, you got a sneaker. And they said, well, that's right, we got a sneaker, but it's not a collectible sneaker. The laces are different. This is different. That is different. And the way we were able to demonstrate that is we literally created a 3D rendition, put it in VR, and the judges were actually able to hold it. And we were able to duplicate that exact evidence. So the 3-panel bench, we're all able to hold the evidence. And when defense counsel would say, you see these laces, or you see this, you see these markings, this is what, it's authentic, but it's not a collectible. Well, the other side would say, well, wait a second, these are authentic and they are collectible, and allow me to explain why. And it just added a different element to it. And then in the third year, what we did was, which I think was probably one of the more realistic examples, is we actually had the trial in a physical room. But then defense counsel said, Your Honor, we would like to move to virtual exhibit A. And all the judges and everyone put on a headset and they were transported into a scene. It was a slip and fall case. And the whole concept was there a caution sign that was placed, and was it readable and was it legible? And it was one thing to show pictures and argue it. It's another thing to actually take the judges through it, where they could walk through the scene and make their own determination. So it's evolved year after year, kind of from this concept of just being able to leverage VR to now what I think is the most realistic concept, where it's the physical world and the virtual world converging into this new world.
Thank you. That's so fascinating. I want to go back to when Justice, and I was fortunate to attend the first two. I want to go back to where Justice Binney was giving this note at the end of his, he had just finished. He took his goggles off, he called them, and he was talking about how when he started his career in law, there weren't even photocopiers. And now here he was in this virtual headset world, being able to see the legal system kind of unfolding anywhere in front of him. Now, I just want to pass the baton over to some of our graduate students for a moment who have been thinking about how have politics been presented differently over time? And then we'll come back to something else that Ritesh said, but I just want to go back to, I know you just made these 360 videos, so you've been thinking about how presidential debates have changed over the years. And what have you learned and what's been really interesting?
I can go first. I was just trying to make sure I wasn't going to jump on anybody's toes. But I think a really interesting part is that everybody gets a new experience using the new tools for this type of stuff. And that we've kind of learned that to evolve, you have to kind of remember how far we've come with our different technologies. And I think your story was fascinating, Mr. Ritesh. I think that's really crazy that we've come so far with that type of technology, and you're able to do such intense stuff with like the different controls, especially in VR.
I'm going to ask Alexander to jump in.
Yeah, I also feel like it kind of let us reflect and have an appreciation about where we were and where we are and where we are going, right? And it kind of makes us feel like we have a long way to go, because if you look at the evolution of media technologies, which we have broadly looked at in this class, talk about the period where newspaper was the trend. Then we moved on from newspaper coming to radio. Television was kind of a major boost to our media landscape, shaping politics in all forms. especially for making us to physically enjoy presidential debate. And now we are looking at how 360 and VR technologies is going to further enhance our media technologies and even political engagement. So I think it's very interesting, and listening to what Ritesh is saying about courts and superior judges having that experience for the first time, it's very, very interesting. And I'm imagining where we are going to, and not only the courtroom. So I could see the potential of VR also impacting other sectors, like even education and other angles. So it's very, very interesting where we are moving towards so far as media technologies are concerned.
Anyone
Yeah, and if I just may add to that, Nicole, if that's okay,
else?
just to keep it as a conversation, and just like Desiree, I think just the you mentioned earlier like tech and journalism, right, and just being able to leverage this type of technology and kind of bringing in what Alexander has been talking about as well with 360 and creating websites. Well, I remember 6 years ago or even like 10 years ago how difficult it was to just create a website and present the information. Right now, you can spin something up in a matter of minutes, and it can be engaging. And with generative AI, that we could do even more things. Just imagine being able to present this data in a way that's consumable and able to have user interaction. Like, I think this really is the future. So I just wanted to add that. It's super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'll jump in too, because I can add a little bit of a historical perspective. Because when I turned 18 and was eligible to vote, I was able to vote in the Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan election of 1980. And, since then, I've voted in every single election since then. And it's been interesting to sort of watch the way the whole process has changed and how technology has infused itself. We certainly saw it in a big way with Obama, and how he was able to sort of leverage the emerging social media platforms and take advantage of sort of reaching the public that way. Even before then, how Clinton came out of nowhere and sort of made himself be like the young cool guy, right? That everybody sort of gravitated to, and he was able to surprise everybody with that election. So it's been interesting to sort of watch the smart politicians that figure out ways to leverage emerging technologies or emerging platforms and use it to their advantage. And it makes me wonder, about VR and what sort of place in the future that will have. Because now that we've had an opportunity to sort of put these glasses on and sort of be immersed in that world, it's just so absolutely mind-blowing to me that I can imagine a world where if somebody's doing a town hall somewhere, if a candidate's doing a town hall, you're there with millions of people watching this town hall and being able to raise your hand and ask a question if you want to, and I believe that as prices come down and we're able to get more scale, and maybe they're not as clunky perhaps as they are right now, that it could potentially be an election game changer for the future. So I'm excited to see, how technology continues to sort of change the way we are involved in the whole political process.
Yeah, I could like VR town halls, right? Like, again, I think it was I made notes here, Daniel, right, talking about athletics and technology and kind of your passion for that, right? And I think it was the NBA. Nicole, was it the NBA? I think it was the NBA, right, that partnered with Meta, where
Yeah.
you literally wear you could wear the headset, and you got a front row seat, a courtside seat to like to a Lakers game or something, right? At a fraction of the cost. That also opened up a whole other world. I'm wearing my policing and lawyer hat, right? Around counterfeits. Because hey, when you go to these games and you want to show off your avatar, you want to buy some new kicks and you want a jersey, right? And you're gonna buy stuff with the swoosh or with the with Jordan or whatever. And are you actually buying legitimate items? And that actually opened up a whole other world of litigation. I don't know, Nicole, if I shared the story with you. I got a phone. I think I might have. I got a phone call from a major brand, like a major brand. We've all heard of it. I won't disclose the brand. And they said, Ritesh, can you help us with counterfeits? I was like, sure. Like, what do you want? Right? They're like, well, we want to seize a bunch of goods. It's purses essentially that that are being sold. And I was like, okay, well, happy to kind of navigate you through the legal process for that. And they said, yeah, but it's being sold on in this virtual commercial plaza. And I was like, what do you mean this virtual commercial plaza? And it's literally like like they're selling it in VR for avatars to have these purses that are branded, but they have nothing to do with the brand. And they're counterfeit. And I was like, well, this is an interesting problem to have, right? And how are we going to go ahead and seize it? Obviously opens up jurisdictional issues and stuff like that. But yeah, fascinating. But when you talk about like that front row seat, the town halls, and Daniel with his tech and athletics, like, man, like with the world of possibilities and the era that we're living in.
So Ritesh, our class actually happens inside the headsets. So everyone has a headset that they use from home to attend the class, which means that you can go on a little field trip this week. And that's that if you go into Meta Horizons main stage, or if you go into Rec Room, you will find these NBA stores, and there are these digital collectibles that you can buy. And one of the things that's starting to happen is like companies like Ready Player Me are trying to attach on to those collectible outfits that are more interoperable, like able to cross different platforms, which is both interesting from a marketing perspective, but also concerning in the way that Ritesh is framing it around what happens if it's counterfeit. And now it's like not even, it's a digital good, and we have these digital estates and digital problems. But just to kind of spin this back to VR and video games and AR, I just want to highlight that this idea of like politics inside immersive technology is not new. It's not something that hasn't been done before. These are things that you keep hearing about. So the mayor in Florida, he actually did a whole mayoral address inside of a metaverse space. In 2020, Biden-Harris campaign launched a map in Fortnite. In 2020, U.S. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she actually went inside Animal Crossing to do some campaigning as an avatar. And then shortly after that, and I can't remember the exact year, but I think 2021, 2022, Andrew Yang actually did a significant amount of campaigning for his New York mayoral address campaign inside various metaverse platforms. So this sort of like idea of campaigning with VR is not new. We're seeing a lot of it with AI right now globally. So I think these technologies are going to be moving in this direction. I kind of want to turn the floor to Ritesh and then the grad students with this question of, okay, so we had this moot in the metaverse and we're seeing politics expanding. What's the potential of these kind of immersive technologies, whether it's AR, AI, VR, spatial computing is, and I always talk about spatial computing. It's like, it's really just mixed reality inside of a headset. They're just repackaging it because they don't want to be seen as like the gaming device. So we can call it spatial computing, but it's all the same thing. So the question is this: what is the potential and what are the drawbacks or concerns or things that we really need to have at the forefront of our legal, ethical, cultural, social processes so that we are not hit sideways when these things become more relevant? So what is the potential of VR for politics and what are the drawbacks? So I'm going to go to Ritesh and then we'll go to whoever wants to jump in after.
Yeah, I think the potential is endless when it comes to this type of technology. It opens up a whole world of possibilities that just weren't possible before. You could definitely, you can. I actually had. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to check out the Apple Vision Pro yet, but I did get a chance to check it out, and it was phenomenal. It actually felt like you were in the location that you were in, and then being able to bring in different artifacts. They were talking about this ability to have, sit in a race car or do meditation. But when I started thinking about the political components of this, I said, okay, well, what about getting messaging across? What about being able to hyper target individuals? And one of the examples that I had a chance to see with a third party was they created AI generated individuals. In one case, it was Albert Einstein. And the question I posed is, could it be a president of the United States answering your questions? Imagine having a one-on-one conversation with your local politician, AI generated, approved, avatar. It's been fed all the speeches, all the thoughts, policy positions, and being able to have that one-on-one conversation and get your questions answered. And it's very possible. I've actually seen demos for other industries, WebMD obviously being one of them. Just think about all the biometrical information that could be collected from, I think the new Apple Watch also does sleep apnea detection. It does breathing. It does your heart rate. I think some of us might be wearing them right now. How many steps you take or how many steps you should be taking, because it tells me to keep moving because I'm nowhere close to my goal. So it's collecting a whole array of information. If I go to the doctor, they look at me for like 15 seconds and give me a diagnosis and then end up giving me some medication that hopefully does the trick. Imagine if you had all this data, but now you have this doctor literally right in front of you, right? And I think similar to a financial advisor, there's 2 billion unbanked people in the world. How many of us, we have money, right? Whether, no matter what the quantum is, but we're working, we're making money, we're saving money. But do you have a financial advisor? Imagine a AI powered financial advisor. And I think the possibilities are endless. But when it comes to politics, I thought like that was a very interesting application. The fact that most of us will probably never get a chance to meet the president of the United States or have a one-on-one conversation with a local elected official in the real world, but we can in the virtual world, and it makes it that much more approachable. So I thought that was kind of really interesting from a political standpoint. But clearly, I think the drawbacks are there is no, like the internet, right? Like we have a protocol, we have a framework. It doesn't matter which browser we go on. We can be on Firefox, we could be on Edge, we could be on Safari, right? There's a standard, right? We just go into the address bar, we put in the address, and voila, right? We can log into using single sign-on with our identities to whether it be Microsoft products, StreamYard, social media. We can't do that right now with virtual reality. Your avatar in Apple is very different than your avatar and your digital persona in Meta, which is very different than some of the other platforms as well, whether you're using Engage or whatever. It's not the single avatar. It doesn't carry, like we just don't have that framework. So I think one of the big drawbacks is going to be, are we going to develop, it's just impossible to develop for every single platform. Are we going to see some sort of framework? The only way I see this kind of coming out is if there's any antitrust related litigation, or people are forced to have some sort of standard. But until that happens, that's a major drawback. And obviously a big drawback of the technology is the cost of the technology. There is a digital divide. A lot of people can't afford these devices. I always thought, like, I think the future of it is, we kind of saw it with Google Cardboard, right? Where you just take your phone and you just stick it on, and voila, you get somewhat of a semi-immersive experience. And I think once these companies figure out how to replicate AR, MR, whatever, using our devices and some very cheap, simple solution like Google Cardboard, just the access to the technology is going to be a big deal. So until that happens, I think adoption is going to be not as fast as we would like it, but it does open up a very interesting possibilities. But yes, AI generated politicians, I think that is coming, and that's going to be the future.
I agree. And I think we've talked about this before. And I want to go to Desiree because we had a glorious chat just a couple hours ago about this exact thing. And I said, it's going to be AI people, the agents we're going to be able to talk to them. But I want to just jump into a few things that Ritesh said. And I think we've had this conversation in actual real life and as avatars. Our avatars have said to each other and our physical bodies have said to each other that really the biggest hurdle right now is adoption, and that's because they're clunky, they're expensive, they're not everywhere. But John, do you remember what the number is? Like, there's a lot of these headsets that have been sold.
I think I want to say, I think our estimate was like 1%, but I looked it up and it seemed to say about 20% of people had headsets, and so we said let's be conservative and say 10%.
Yeah, roughly. But a substantial number of households in the United States have a headset. And we have speculated in our class that this is likely the younger generation, but as they adopt it, as they're used to using it, it's not going to be that outlandish for them to think about using it in multiple ways for multiple things in their lives, whether it's socializing, education, work, leisure. And I was mentioning to Desiree earlier that some of the people who I know who are developing for the Apple Vision Pro right now, they're literally spending their entire day working inside the headset. They have replaced their physical computers with the headset. So if you think down the road, a long way down the road, it's not that outlandish to think that I could attend a presidential debate. I could walk around it. I could change my viewpoint. I could see the candidates from multiple directions. I'm not going to be limited by this two-dimensional screen, whether it's my computer, my phone that I'm streaming live. 20 minutes before this, both Trump and Kamala Harris were streaming live on my Instagram and one of them on TikTok. So, I mean, they're there already, but how cool would it be to jump into that live in a real environment? Desiree, I'm hoping you can kind of jump out of this conversation, maybe bring in some of the stuff we talked about earlier.
Of course. I had a great time earlier discussing like a lot of where we think it's going to go. And that was definitely a discussion like in the political landscape, being able to be in the room with candidates during debates or even just meeting people one-on-one in that type of landscape would just change. I think a lot of the more relational things, and people will pay more attention to the politicians. And that's something I think all of us as a class kind of agreed that becoming more aware was something that has been happening more when you're inside of more virtual space and you're kind of there and seeing them more on that one-on-one level. But I think a big drawback right now is definitely, again, like the cost, the wait, and then people actually wanting to get it, because that's also like a big part is like, we're part of the early adopters. We're starting to pick it up, but it's definitely looks like it's going to be the newer, like the kids who are growing up with it now, they're going to have a great time. Gen Alpha is going to definitely adopt it going into more of their higher education because they're exposed to it in their, like, I want to say elementary, middle school time. Like they know what it looks like. They've kind of got more of that comfort of understanding the digital space better than other people have.
I was mentioning to Desiree earlier, I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and they're both learning how to code inside of a headset for one of their classes at school. So that's something that we didn't have when we were growing up. Alexander, I want you to kind of engage with me a little bit. And one thing I said to Desiree earlier was that, you know, there are disadvantages to being inside of a headset in the same way we can think about, you know, writing causes pain, it causes backaches, it can strain our eyes. We have these same kind of restrictions in VR, and you're probably all feeling it. You've been in VR enough now that you've felt the weight of the headset and you felt some of these issues emerging. Alexander, do you think that's going to limit people's ability to engage with it? Or do you think that as it gets lighter, that's going to change? What are your thoughts?
I think he's frozen.
I agree. Does anyone else want to jump into my conversation?
Yeah, I'll, you know, I find, you know, if you look at electronics over history that have sort of reached scale or that have sort of become mainstream, you know, it typically tends to be because they're solving a need that people have, or they're making people's lives easier, right? You know, even if you go back to like VCRs and then DVDs, right, to watch movies, you know, it made people not having to go out to the theater; they could watch it at home. Cell phones got adoption because you could start talking to people. I mean, it solved issues for people, you know, and so I'm curious to see with VR. It's just sort of a neat, fun thing to have, you know, but what is it about it that makes people feel like it's going to change their lives, that they need to have it? And I don't think it's there yet, in my opinion, you know, and so to get that sort of adoption, I think I mentioned this in one of our classes too, Ritesh, I'd mentioned that, you know, Tom Cruise's Maverick movie, got everybody back in the theaters, right? All of a sudden people were like, oh gosh, everybody's talking about it. I got to go see this movie. So is it some sort of application within VR that gets created where everybody's talking about it and they're like, well, damn, I guess I better go get one of these things to see what everybody's talking about, right? But there's got to be, I think, a need that people have that gets fulfilled in order for these things to get more mainstream, in my opinion, based on historical data.
I think it's going to be like a Taylor Swift exclusive VR concert that's going to get everyone, all the Swifties, getting headsets and getting online.
I mean, I think Fortnite has done a tremendous job here in bringing people in. So we've had like the Travis Scott concert and the Ariana Grande concert, both like sold a crazy number of tickets. But yeah, I think Ritesh is right. It's going to be something that we don't probably expect quite yet. I think there's a lot of uses that are possible. And I don't think that people recognize, and maybe Ritesh can jump in here, I don't think people recognize what the capabilities of the technology are unless you've used it.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I got an invite to the Chainsmokers VR concert. I thought it was kind of cool, just everyone in this area enjoying some music. And but we didn't have to buy tickets. And I was like, imagine like having the ability to sell tickets and selling merch. But yeah, I think it's going to be art and entertainment. I don't think it's going to be politics. I think we have the first VR debate or something like that. I don't think that's going to get people buying headsets, but something really mainstream. I don't know. I'm convinced. I think Taylor Swift is going to sign a big deal with the Apple or Meta or whomever and do an exclusive concert, and we're going to get millions of these headsets. They'll be sold out. Like, that is my prediction. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, well, it's all good. But
I think you're in the right track because the Eras Tour went on to Disney Plus and it spiked the Disney Plus membership sales substantially. And we already know that Disney hired a metaverse exec that they then fired. And then shortly after that, they announced they had a partnership with Apple Vision Pro. So we know that they're already in talks. And so I could see something like that happening. I agree with Ritesh that it's not going to be the politics, it's going to be the entertainment and likely sports and stuff too, Daniel.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on the idea. This connects to kind of what Ritesh mentioned earlier. Digital job opportunities. When we think about something that would bring people into these headsets, I mean, you can kind of see IKEA is doing a collaboration with Roblox where they're going to be paying people to work inside of this virtual Roblox store. And that's just at the forefront of what we're going to see in the future. You look at the strike that's happening or that was happening at the docks. People are going to need work. There's going to have to be some type of evolution with AI taking over so many jobs like call centers and just all other smaller jobs are being taken over. So there's going to have to be something to replace it. And I truly believe that digital job opportunities in these immersive spaces is what's going to be at the forefront of the future. And even tying that into politics, you look at, having these political avatars, having these political representatives in these spaces, they're going to have to be paid monitors. They're going to have to be people that are put in places that can monitor these regulations and make sure that everything's running smoothly. So I think it's going to create a ton of jobs. Honestly, that's what I believe.
I want to hear more about that. And I also want to pose the question, how amazing would it be if you had a verified avatar that could vote inside VR instead of having to go wait at the polling station? You can pick up a pen already. You can read. I think that'd be great. Daniel, can you elaborate on like what kind of jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. So polling station, that brings me to my next point, actually. So I believe that, these immersive spaces are going to increase political voter engagement. So, like you mentioned, polling, waiting in those long polling lines, they could figure out a way to negate that problem. Voting engagement could naturally increase. Imagine being able to vote from the access of your own, and that ties into jobs. There are going to have to be people that are going to secure those votes and protect those votes to make sure that there aren't any hackers or people that are trying to compromise that space. So it'll be important to have those type of job opportunities available while also creating this easily accessible, safe space for voters and other people.
Can I just jump in quickly? Because as you're kind of mentioning this and Nicole around voter ID, or avatar verification. There is a whole industry right now being set up when it comes to verification. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. The first time I came across it was there was a law firm in Toronto, I think it's in Toronto, that bought some real estate in Decentraland and opened up the first law office to provide legal representation. And the question became so as a lawyer, we have rules with the Law Society of Ontario. The rules include verifying the client, making sure that at some point you meet, making sure that you understand the nature of the issue, but also currency requirements as well. You just can't walk into a lawyer's office with bags of money, right? It's you got to prove where that money actually came from. There's rules around it. I think the number's like $7,400 or $10,000. I really should know that number, but I don't deal with that side of the house. But that's the so we had rules, and I posed the question. I was like, how on earth are we going to verify who our clients are in walking into our virtual law office in Decentraland? Also, there's jurisdictional issues. Would our professional insurance cover us? What if we hire employees? Do we, what is the minimum wage rules? Is it where the employees physically located? Can they unionize? It opened up a whole array of questions around labor and employment and verification. And yeah, there were third parties that said, yeah, we will verify an individual and their avatar. And again, I'm a little bit skeptical. I think we need frameworks. We need better ways of verifying, but we are going down that path. And once you've been verified, once you get that blue check mark, not so much on X, I guess, because you can buy those, but on some of these other platforms, and you're validated and verified, well, guess what? Why can't you vote? I don't see a reason.
Yes. Okay. So we're almost 2 decades into social media, and we're struggling with governance in social media. And the geopolitical fault lines are falling all over the place. And we see different platforms being attacked for being from different areas. And we see just like the surplus of information, the sheer volume of information becomes hard to moderate. How are we going to moderate this VR version of the internet when we're struggling to moderate and govern the current issues that we have? And I ask this because I think that everything we see, misinformation, deep fakes, all of that is going to, and we've already seen it. I mean, it's not like it's going to, it's like it's already happening. We see these sort of issues happening in VR spaces, but they're likely to be amplified. So how do we deal with governance? Or like, and you're so smart that like, what's best practices? Like, what should people be doing? These companies, what should we be holding them accountable to? And what should lawmakers be saying? And is that necessary?
Well, you guys have Section 240 of the Communications Decency Act, right? Where a lot of these companies are stating that their platforms are not publisher, user-generated content, is not subject to any sort of monitoring. If we God forbid we monitor, is that censorship, right? And it's the exact same. It's the exact same thing. And we could probably talk about this ad nauseum and not even come up with a solution, because it does come down to the platforms and the willingness of the platforms. I think there is legislation across the world now being introduced in the different states in the United States, also in Canada, Australia, dealing with online harms in particular. So you can't go and just make frivolous claims. You can't go and defame someone. You can't go and even when it comes to AI generated, now there's watermarks that must be placed on certain content or tagged. If it's AI generated, failure to tag could essentially land you in Twitter jail or Facebook jail, I guess. So there are that component of it. But Nicole, we've put the cart before the horse, right? And the problem is we're trying to deal with 21st century problems with 20th century frameworks. It's just not going to work. It's not like, hey, this thing called VR or MR is going to be launched in 2 years. Hey, society, let's sit down and come up with a framework and what we're okay with and what we're not. No. It's here's the shiny thing. Everyone adopts it. And now we're trying to put guardrails or safety rails around it. And governments are trying to legislate and punish through really substantive fines. We're seeing it in the EU. We're seeing it in the US. We're starting to see it in Canada. But is that the solution, right? Again, I think that there is a responsibility on vendors to make sure that they create products that are safe, that they think these things through, the legal applications, the privacy, the human rights, security as well. Security is a big part of this. We haven't even touched on some of the security implications of this type of technology. But yeah, I think we're going to be able to get this right? Or is this going to be the Wild West? I'm hoping we do. I'm hoping that the legislation goes through and these vendors comply. But until Section 240, is it 230 or 240 of the Communications Decency Act gets changed, or there's some sort of amendment, I think these are going to be some very real challenges we're going to have to work through.
One thing that's interesting is if we look at what's happening with social media and like these very punitive, we're going to ban teens, we're going to ban this, we're going to ban that. And really, there's not a lot of great evidence to suggest that that is the best recourse, the best way forward. It's really more right now, what we need to think about is how do we build safe spaces for the people who are using it where they're using it. And so I think that this is such a challenge for us, and it will continue to be a challenge for us. John, do you want to jump in at all? Or no?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here about, just how technology has never, ever been on pace with the legal world, and I think, when we think of copyright, issues, I think of the days of Napster when people were file sharing and stuff. Like, none of the legislation was caught up with that. And it's just, we're always trying to, technology is at such a different pace than legislation and culture. It's kind of like you gotta build it as it goes. And we're talking a lot about these different platforms, now being kind of in charge of, as Meta builds its metaverse and Apple builds its metaverse, they're growing and changing along with it as well, and understanding how users are using these technologies. So it is obviously the Wild West, as they say, and we kind of have to, take it as it comes. It's a challenge, and I think we're talking about all those concepts as we talk about them in, our class here. I've really enjoyed that. And so it's been fun to discuss, and there's no real answer, I don't think, but yeah.
I remember in 2022 asking my students to look at the terms and services as they accepted all the Oculus terms and services and all the apps that they were going on to. And some of the apps we were joining at that point had none. So it was just like, you're going to let us record? Yes. Yeah. And you had to say yes, or you couldn't get on. So there weren't the same kind of protections in place. Where now, and how many of you read any of this? Did you read it when you were setting up your headsets? Yeah, Daniel. And what did you learn?
So my first experience in the VR headset was with VR chat. But at the time, a lot of clips were going viral with it, so I tried it out. And there weren't any, it was just kind of like you put your username in, and it's like this open creative space. It's like the beginning of the code. And then we recently just logged back on for this course. We had to create an account for it. And when I logged back on this time, there was terms and conditions that went through, and it was pretty much just saying, hey, we're not responsible for any of the language you hear, any of the characters you encounter in the space, or any of the worlds you enter. Pretty much just washing their hands with everything that happens with the individuals that use the service. And Ritesh, you made a great point about putting some of the responsibilities on the creators of these spaces and these products.
Yeah, and Daniel, when you hit the all-encompassing "I agree" button, right, to their terms and services, there was clearly probably stuff around the data that they're going to collect, but also around advertising, right? Like most of these things, when you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I think we all know that the data is then used to hyper-target advertising. And I think it was David, right? Who said you did an undergrad in advertising, and that was kind of your thing. And you can, so in Canada, advertising and television is regulated by the CRTC. I believe in the US is the FTC, if I'm not mistaken, right? So like you can't go ahead and try to sell cigarettes to minors or alcohol, right? To minors. There's rules around it. Like you're not going to put alcoholic beverage commercials in, on some cartoon show on Sunday morning. But do those same regulations apply in advertising in VR? And can you hyper target children that are clearly going to be on these games and these platforms? And who are you going to where are you going to file your complaint? With the platform, with the FTC, right? What type of fines are going to be levied? What if they're headquartered in Lithuania or somewhere, right? Or in a country that doesn't adhere to what's called a mutual legal assistance treaty? I think it's 67 countries or something like that. So like, what are we going, like, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to do this? Because I agree, right? And we went on and we agreed to advertising, but clearly, as you know, from Bruce's industry in television, there's rules. Like you just can't advertise to whomever, whenever. But we don't have the same rules as the medium has changed, but the kind of the fundamentals are still there.
Oh, I want David to jump in so badly. Also, I want to note that my Twitter is blowing up, and I don't think it's because of me or this. I think it's because David's a football player here at Texas State, and so yay, go Bobcats! As the advertiser in the room, what do you think about what Ritesh just said?
Yeah, of course. I mean, definitely, I agree. I think over the last 100 years, as like the advertising industry has evolved, people have just come up with new mediums to put advertisements on. I mean, nowadays we're seeing advertisements everywhere. And now as we're looking into virtual reality, I think it's scary how many opportunities advertisers are going to have to influence people that may not be protected from the things that they're going to see. And with the lack of regulations and how new this technology is, I think there are going to be a lot of cases that are going to need to be sorted out because it is the Wild West right now. But I think the advertising potentials in virtual reality are endless because it really is just a second reality that advertisement agencies can take advantage of.
So, David, when your football team ends up hosting its first VR, live match, right? And I'd like to be invited to that.
Oh my gosh, I want to attend this.
Right, I'm going to attend. I'm going to get my headset and put it on. But in the physical world, I'm certain that there's going to be advertisements on the field and their sponsors and stuff like that, whether it be stuff on your jerseys. And in VR, it would be really interesting because we can hyper target, right? Would it be appropriate that if I sell advertising rights to a whole bunch of companies, and then based on those virtual ads could change based on my likes and dislikes, right? And it could be very adaptive. And again, a whole world of possibilities for advertisers, but there's always going to be that ethical component to it. And what happens when it goes wrong? And I think that is where if we don't have the right framework or the right leadership, and the people kind of developing this with, let's say, MR or VR for good, we're going to run into those issues, and those issues could have some very severe consequences.
So in professional soccer, you'll see advertisements on little stands that are placed behind the goal, and they're not actually there. They're digitally imprinted on there so that you can only see them when you're watching on television. And I think that makes the case even stronger for what can be done in virtual reality in terms of having different demographics presented with different advertisements. And that opens the door to a lot more questions.
Alexander, I saw you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch a little bit about the ethical implications, and I just wanted to say that all the things we are talking about, all the VR affordances, obviously is gonna be key or integral in terms of the adoption. But when it comes to ethical implications, I think that in the long run, we may have to entrust it according to the particular VR platform that we engaged in. So there is going to be like the platform dynamics will determine the level of ethical principles. And it's just like any social media platform. So if you look at meta platforms, they have certain boundaries that they use to flag false information. They are partnered with organizations to do fact checking and all that, but it varies by platform. So TikTok has its own way of moderation, checking some of these ethics and misinformation, and it differs. It varies from meta platform. So I think in the long run, the particular company, maybe whether Oculus, whether Meta platform, they are going to be in charge of our data and privacy and all these ethical principles. Because so far as we don't have a common ground regulation, then we may have to depend on these companies to regulate or not regulate.
Alexander, isn't that scary though? Like if we kind of think about what's happening right now, and I've written about this, I've gone on media and talked about this as well. So it's nothing, it's not a new position for me, but I'm kind of uneasy with these tech companies creating quasi-judicial systems, right? Like, for example, if you have an issue with me, you can again, after you've exhausted everything, we can go to court, right? And a judge can decide and settle our disputes. Like that's there's rule of law. That's the system that we adhere to. But these organizations are creating their own quasi-judicial systems where if you have an issue, so if there's some content moderation and something was taken down and you disagree with that, well, you could literally go to you're kind of bound because as Daniel mentioned, you hit the I agree, right? You're bound by their version of the court, right? Which is some sort of arbitration related process with people that they have appointed, making a decision on what you can and can't see. Now, that doesn't mean that there should be a free-for-all, but it also means that they've literally created their own quasi-judicial system. That is scary. I don't know. Am I the only one that thinks that we may be going down a path that we don't want to go down? Because X can create their own, Meta can create their own, all the big other tech companies can create their own. That's fine if they have processes for issues, but right now that is the only venue you have. And if you have an issue if you even have an issue with these platforms, do you even have a phone number to call them? No, right? If your account gets hacked or breached, which is a huge issue from a security standpoint, because a lot of these fake, deep fakes and disinformation, misinformation is being spread through hacked accounts. So they're legitimate accounts from people that reside in the United States, and people are getting then spammed, and that's a whole other story. But if you have an issue, like where do you go? I know tons of people that have had their accounts hacked, and there's nothing that can be done with it. But if you put something up there that the platform disagrees with, and now you're kind of bound by this quasi-judicial process that you agree to when you hit I agree. I don't know. I agree. Like that's exactly what's happening. Platforms are creating their own process, but until we have this formalized system for all platforms, that's our only option. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not the right option.
We should be so concerned and we should be critical. And the public's job right now is to be critical of the power players. And the power players are the platforms that we are using on a daily basis, who are extracting our every movement, our every piece of data, everything we feed into it. And I just want to highlight, and this is nothing new that we haven't spoken about, but we're on the public scale right now. So I want to just highlight that you put a headset on and now they're tracking potentially your eyes. They're talking about building in software to be able to detect emotions so that the avatars can replicate that. These are all things, eye tracking, the boundary spaces. I can use my headset in like 5 different places and my headset will remember where it is. So I think there's lots of things to be concerned about. Are people concerned about this? Ritesh? I think Ritesh is. Is anyone else concerned?
Yeah, I mean, already they have so many informations about us. I mean, with our social media accounts, in some of our email account, there's already so much information about us that we don't know. There are studies that claims that I don't want to mention the company. They are able to even predict when a woman gave birth because they were able to know the location, the time that it goes to the hospital. Like there's so many information, but now we are getting to the level where, like you mentioned, now our physical, if they're able to track our eyes, then you can imagine the kind of information that they're absorbing. But what is scary is that who holds these, companies accountable, and what is the level of accountability? How do we bring them to the table? How do we check them out? And that's a question that I'm really interested in.
So I think that one component, and the EU has been leading the charge on this, is the right to be forgotten, or the right of erasure, right? If these companies do have data on you, the ability for you to compel them to remove that data. But right now it's really hard. In fact, if you go to all these major social media accounts and you delete your account, or you're not actually deleting your account, you're temporarily deactivating your account for a certain set amount of time, because as Danielle knows, you hit I agree, right? And that's what you agreed to. So and then you can come back in like 20 days and it's like your account was just dormant. Well, wait a second, I thought I deleted my account. Why on earth is this all still here? You kept my data? Yeah, just in case you change your mind. And then what type of data are they actually keeping once you leave the platform? Again, you're not paying for the platform, so your data is a currency. Maybe that's the exchange. But on the flip side is this whole movement around the right to be forgotten, or the right of erasure, is really taking steam around the world for that very reason. As you raise your concerns, Alexander.
And I should just flag that Ritesh and I have been working on a paper with two other colleagues right around this topic of what happens with your data next. Even if you don't know what happens with your data after you've built this lifespan of a digital footprint, and then what happens with it? What happens with it when it's being used to train systems? Do we know when it's being used to train systems? Do we know when our loved ones decide to have it used to be trained systems after we're gone, and so forth and so forth? So there's all these questions that are just, we are the first of our kind to be having to deal with some of these issues. Anyone else jumping into any final words here? John, any final words? I know we're getting close to the end.
Yeah, I don't know if this kind of like encompasses everything. We've touched a lot about VR and emerging technologies a lot, obviously, as it relates to legal and public issues. But I just keep getting the sense that we're talking about nothing that's new. Even though we're talking about everything that's brand new, we've dealt with this with the TCP/IP protocol when the internet was first starting. We needed interoperability. We all needed to be on the same page. We're still dealing with that today. A lot of the legal issues that I think they just all have a lot of fundamental commonalities. And it's nothing that we haven't faced before, but yet it's just on a different scale. It's exciting. And it's also, I just kept getting the sense we're both charting totally new waters, and I kept just keeping the sense we've been here before, So it is interesting. Dalen, I saw your hand up.
Sorry, John, were you waiting for someone?
I thought I saw Dylan's hand up, and then my dog jumped in my lap. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Ritesh, I want to thank you so much for coming this evening. We've had such a great conversation with you, and the grad students too. Like, what a wonderful conversation we've had this evening. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. Any final words about the future of immersive tech in relation to politics or anything else we've talked about tonight? Do you want to have one last departing statement?
Look, I know we talk a lot about the concerns, but overall, I am excited. I think that this is a really powerful technology. I encourage everyone to keep exploring, seeing what the art of the possible is, but not just hitting, being able to hit that pause button and saying, okay, this is where it's headed, but what are the ethical considerations, the legal considerations, the privacy considerations? These should not be an afterthought, but kind of built in right in by design. We're kind of living in this world where we can literally put on a headset and be transformed and just be transformed into a virtual world, or have some sort of mixed reality component. We can pay with decentralized currency. Our avatars, we can have our own identity. The example I like to use is, and just, it's very interesting to kind of think about this. If I spend 8 hours of my day working, 6 hours of my day sleeping, what's 8 plus 6, 14, 24 hours in the day. So the other 10 hours, what am I doing? I'm in VR. I'm in this virtual world. So do I identify more realistically as Ritesh Kotak, the physical self, or do I identify more as my avatar with my virtual friends? And is that kind of the world that we're headed towards? So we need to really start having some very serious conversations. This is not cartoon. This is some very serious stuff that's going to have real world implications. And I just want to thank everyone for listening to me for the last little bit. And this was a fantastic conversation. I hope we can all stay in touch and do this again. And thank you, Nicole and John. Really appreciate it.
I absolutely love tonight's conversation. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you who have been tuning in, and people have been live tweeting. I know it's called live Xing, but that doesn't sound the same. People have been live tweeting us, which has been very fun. Thank you so much again, Ritesh. Thank you to all of our wonderful grad students. Thank you to my colleague, John. And just have a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing all of you again soon. And my grad class will be back in VR next Thursday evening. Have a great night, everyone. Bye. Okay.